Hey everyone, Gary here with Tennessee Stands, and really excited today to have some conversation with some law students at Vanderbilt University. As well as I do, across the state of Tennessee, we're dealing with a lot of policies now coming from private organizations, whether it be business or private education institutions, secondary and higher learning, that are dealing with these requirements to either be vaccinated. In fact, some employees are creating different sets of benefits. We now have two different classes of people, right? We have unvaccinated people and vaccinated people. And so we're seeing all sorts of things go on, including Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, that has now decided to charge a $1,500 health and safety fee to students who are unvaccinated. But these students we're going to talk to today are law students at Vanderbilt University. And it's great to hear their story and their perspective on how these requirements are affecting them personally. And before we do that, just sort of want to show you what's going on. So you can see on your screen here, this is the website as of today at Vanderbilt University. And you can see right here, I'll just sort of read this statement: to keep the Vanderbilt University community as safe as possible and help ensure the ability to continue to conduct in-person teaching and learning, all new and returning students will be required to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 for the 2021-22 academic year. And actually, they made this clarification at a later date. They've since added, additionally, the university will require employed faculty, staff, and postdoctoral fellows to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 for this academic school year. So this is what we're dealing with. You've got a school that has made a very clear stance on its desire to see its entire student population vaccinated. I'll let these students tell you more about how that's going to affect them personally on campus if they choose to not comply. And so I want to introduce to you these folks here. We're going to start with Carolyn Kraft. If you follow The Federalist at thefederalist.com, she was interviewed by The Federalist and began to share her experience publicly about how the university is infringing upon their individual liberties there at the school. So, hey, welcome everyone. We're excited that you get to share with our audience here at Tennessee Stands. And so, Carolyn, we'll start with you. Just go ahead and tell us your experience, where you are now, how it's affecting you personally. Just go for it. Unmute your mic.
I think I'd get used to this by now.
All good.
Last year, but so I'm a rising 2L at Vanderbilt Law School. And I mean, throughout the year, I was kind of keeping track about Vanderbilt's general rhetoric when it comes to the vaccine. And they were really encouraging it, of course, but they had yet to tell us that they were going to mandate it. And then after school ended back in May, they announced that it was going to be required. And they gave us 1 month to get a potential religious or medical exemption. And they were not transparent at all about these exemptions. It was practically impossible to get really either of them or to get any information. When you tried to talk to anyone at the school about it, they were generally very vague. They didn't really have any answers. And it took a lot of independent kind of research to figure out what your rights were as an individual at the university. And of course, only giving us 1 month, and them telling us after school ended. So we have students across the United States who are suddenly hit with, hey, if you want to come back to school, you have to get a vaccine. And if you want to get a medical exemption, you're going to have to talk to somebody in the state that you're residing in, or if you're even if in the US, you might be in a different country, you're gonna have to figure out what potential rights you have for an exemption. And then following that, I was like, okay, well
and just to clarify that point, so I mean, as a student, you found out sort of mid-May after school had ended that this was going to be a requirement, and your deadline for a religious exemption, if I remember, was June 15th.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. And they were not, transparent about any potential exemptions, religious or medical, what the requirements were. I was contacting people left and right trying to get some answers. And it was generally, you just get hit by roadblock over and over again. So, I mean, it seems that the school's trying to really encourage getting this vaccine. And so they're doing so by making it really hard to get an exemption if you need one. I wanted to kind of see, as a little personal experiment, kind of what, a medical exemption would be and what potential doctors have their opinions on it. So I went to the Vanderbilt Student Health Center and I inquired about, what they knew about the vaccine, because I just want to see what information was given to them. And so I asked, and she was like, I encourage you to get the vaccine. I got the vaccine. And I was like, that's cool for you, I guess. Did you know that the first human trial of RNA vaccines was done in 2017? And it's an ongoing trial. They actually haven't concluded it because they're still looking for long-term effects and consequences. It was done in Germany in 2017. It was an RNA vaccine for rabies done by, I think the biotech company was CureVac. And so I asked her, I was like, are you aware that they actually haven't done any long-term trials on this, on humans? And she had no idea. As we continued the conversation, I realized she was only parroting what a supervisor told her to say. And that was, really concerning.
As you say all this, I'm just thinking, the pushback in the media is you hear all of these uneducated folks that are just scared of the vaccine and they don't know what they're talking about. And well, here we're sitting with fairly educated Vanderbilt law students, talking about all the shenanigans that you've seen go on with this vaccine and the fact that, but what you're saying is at the end of the day that we're responsible to know those things, right? And make our own medical decisions, not someone else. Jordan, I want to move to you real quick. So you're a, remind me, second year law student, is that right? Or rising third year?
I'm about to be a third year.
Third year, yeah. And just want to hear a little bit about your experience. How is this new requirement by Vanderbilt affecting you personally in real and tangible ways? Let's talk about that.
So I'm not, I think it's really important to frame the conversation in this way. It's not that we're against people getting the vaccine or pro people getting the vaccine. We're just pro people getting to choose whether or not they get the vaccine.
100%.
And I have a lot of family members that work in the healthcare industry and have been around this sort of vaccine talk for a while. And I don't have any qualms with anyone who makes a decision otherwise, but I think that for the university and the time frame they chose to decide that you need a vaccine, that's relatively new. Whereas there are vaccines that are required for school, but those vaccines have had decades of research, some almost 100 years of problems with those diseases, whereas this is relatively new. My real qualm is only that I don't think the university should be forcing us to get it, but I think anyone who chooses to get it should get it.
That makes total sense. What about some of the restrictions that may be placed on you as a student should you choose not to get the vaccine?
So they've floated the idea of, if you choose not to get the vaccine, that you'll have to be masked and socially distanced for the whole year if you're in person. But I see that as pretty problematic, considering you'll just be marking everyone who doesn't have the vaccine for everyone to see. And furthermore, you won't know why someone chose not to get the vaccine. You won't know any more information, and people will make, especially in a shall we say, academic environment that law school is, will make a lot of assumptions based on that.
Yeah. Which, if you have a mask, first off, this person hasn't taken the vaccine probably. Either that or they're super, super scared. They've fully vaccinated and decide to say what, but whatever, their decision. But first off, yeah, is this a crazy anti-vaxxer person, or does this person have a medical condition, or does this person have a religious belief? Or you're right, you start making all these assumptions about people based on the fact that they're just wearing a mask. That's pretty interesting psychology. Brent, you're down in Texas right now. Thankfully, you're a little bit removed out of this. You've graduated your third year at Vanderbilt, but would love to hear a little bit of your perspective on what's happening at this university that you just came from.
Yeah, Gary, I'm fortunate. I think about ready to attend graduation when I heard that they were going to require vaccinations for the students to come back. And Luckily, I'm not coming back, so I don't have to deal with that. But my biggest issue is, like Jordan was saying, I'm really concerned that it's going to really tank the culture within the law school. And some other students don't even really know what the culture is, because the last year and a half, we've all been masked and socially distant and, all these just crazy rules. And so my first year and a half at Vanderbilt Law School was amazing, right? Our culture was, it was just not a very competitive place. Everyone would help you. You knew everyone. You knew what people like to do. It was just a real great place to be. Like, Fridays, the law school had a keg. We'd be sitting there drinking beer in the law school after, studying for a hard week. Some of these 1Ls, 2Ls, and maybe even rising 3Ls don't even maybe remember what that was like. So that's kind of a real sticking point for me, because I wonder, well, if they're going to start making rules for if you're vaccinated, you can do this, and if you're not vaccinated, you can't do this, what are they going to do? Are they going to say, oh, if you're not vaccinated, you can't be a part in all these great, community events that we have, right? Like, is it going to be, oh, we have Blackacre, which is our party where we have kegs, but if you're not vaccinated, you can't come, or like, what are those? But if you're not vaccinated, you can't do this. What is that going to be, and how is that going to affect our student body, and how is that going to affect people's future? Because the connections you make in law school are super important. So it's not just like the embarrassment in the moment of having to wear a mask when everyone else isn't, because you decided not to put something in your body that no one's ever tested. It's 25 years from now. What about the friends you missed out on because you couldn't go to events or something that the school made random rules against?
That's a great point, though. Not just the culture conversation, the context of where you are now as a student, but even in the context of what you just said, how important these relationships are to you in the future moving forward, and just how this one choice, this one requirement can have such a great effect. Do you feel that sort of whether or not you have the vaccine is almost like it's defining us now culturally and how we relate to other people?
Yeah, I saw someone post on social media somewhere, I can't remember where, but it was like, does anyone have any recommendations on how to make people think you're not a Republican if you don't have a mask on? Because somebody obviously was a Democrat, didn't want to wear a mask, and is like, how do I tell people I'm not a Republican? Right. So
because automatically now non-mask wearers are crazy conservatives and mask wearers are just super liberal people. Yeah, I mean, it is quite incredible what we've done. Carolyn, you, obviously having come out as a student, sort of against this requirement at university, being quoted in something like the Federalist, you sort of put yourself out there in a very public way, and all of you are sort of doing that now if you haven't already. What has that looked like in terms of any kind of pushback, any sort of cancel culture that you're facing, any concerns you have taking that back into this fall semester?
Yeah, so I haven't been canceled yet, so I mean, that's good. But when it comes to the vaccine, I have not gotten much pushback on that yet. And that's largely because I've been very vocal with general conservative values. I'm on the Federalist Society. We actually all are on the Federalist Society. So I've always been very, upfront about my, political opinions, my opinions of the law and whatnot. So I received pushback throughout the entire year. I think Brent kind of touched on this. As someone who was a 1L last year, we were not able to connect with our peers in the way that other students were previously. We didn't have Blackacre. We didn't get to socialize and such. And that was really problematic. And now it seems it's going to be carried through to my 2L and 3L experience with these mandates and such. So, I was getting a lot of pushback. I think that my 1L year was very polarized because we weren't able to socialize. We had Brent talked about how Vanderbilt is, very fun and not very competitive and very collegial and such. But the polarization that's going on right now, I had a professor who straight up compared Trump supporters and Trump to Nazis to my entire class of 60 plus students, which is absolutely ridiculous. And so, when a professor is doing something like that, and then I say, yeah, I'm on Federalist Society, which is known to be conservative and libertarian, I'm already getting pushback. So at this point, I really don't care. we'll see what happens when it comes to fall, semester. What I hear, I have no idea what could happen. I don't think it could be worse than this last year. And if it is worse, I don't really care because I'm fighting for liberty and individual rights. I know I'm doing the right thing. I know the other individuals who are on this panel right now are doing the right thing. And if I want to be hated for doing the right thing, then I mean, that's their problem.
And anyone, by the way, can chime in at any moment. Just having a conversation here, but I'm just curious. Do you, at least in the culture on campus? So, Brent, you may be a little bit removed from that, but of course, you have your peers that you're dealing with now. I mean, do you feel that the cancel culture or the pushback-ish things more from the professor class, the faculty class, than the student class? And do you feel that there are a large group of students that sort of think the way you do, that are a little bit more freedom-minded, but maybe concerned about speaking out or in fear of how they'll be perceived? Just interested in hearing the dichotomy between those two camps.
Yeah. So I had the privilege, I guess, of not a word I like to use nowadays, but of getting my first semester of law school in person. So I got to experience what law school's supposed to be like, what it's pretty much been like for a very long time, keeping these traditions going in a high level area. But it seemed as we got more on Zoom that it was more some students that I feel wouldn't have spoken out against you in class are more likely to say worse things to you over Zoom. They're going to be a little bit bolder, a little bit less kind, a little bit less respectful. All the professors that I've interacted with, for the most part, have been excellent. They've moderated the debate. I mean, you have some outliers that I would disagree with, but I think the faculty isn't really the issue. I think it's a lot of students, when they're on Zoom, especially, will say things or respond to your comments in a way that's unkind or silencing that they wouldn't say in person. Whereas when I've been in person, I feel like the debate's far more moderated and considerate.
That's a significant effect on culture, and even just the way we share ideas with each other. That's a really interesting take. Brent, you had something to say?
Yeah. So two things. First, I like to say, like, during my 3 years at Vanderbilt, we have pretty liberal faculty, but they've been very considerate and accepting of conservative viewpoints. There's a couple that are not like that, but overall, almost all of them are. And then I had a different experience than Jordan because I was obviously a 3L, right? And he was a 2L. So 3Ls are kind of notoriously like checked out. So it would just be, if the class was 50 people, it'd be 45 black screens, right? You just wouldn't have any dialogue at all, which obviously is not good, right? So going to Zoom was very hindering to any sort of dialogue for anything on any subject.
So to those of you who are still in school, tell me a little bit about, trying to think of which issue I want to go first. Let me stick to this one first. You obviously, we all know you're in Vanderbilt University, you're a law student, you've got some dollars invested into this, right? So what does that mean for you, having to make a significant decision between a financial investment that you've already made and you want to see a return on that, versus a personal decision you need to make regarding your health that's going to affect the rest of your life in one way or another, positive or negative, whatever. You're having to weigh that personal decision. I want to hear about the tension there, because I know that what's being told is, well, just go to school somewhere else. It's not that big of a deal. I'd like to hear you speak to that.
Well, I think based on the way the United States works nowadays, how late stage our economy is, with it being heavily service oriented and school being so important, saying, oh, you should just go somewhere else for school, especially when you've already chosen a college, is pretty hefty ask. And considering all of us are in law school, this isn't not to belittle undergrad, but this isn't just undergrad.
Right.
We've probably been working, at least I have, for most of our lives to get to this point. We've invested all this money in ourselves, in our future employment. We've bet on ourselves, so to speak. And there's really not an option to go. There's no possibility to go somewhere else. I mean, Carolyn could theoretically throw together a transfer application and maybe go somewhere else, but it's not really possible. And I, as a rising 3L, couldn't. But I wouldn't want to. I like Vanderbilt. I want to stay there. I just disagree with the last decision made by the administration, and I hope they change their mind. Because I think that when you've spent so much time getting to this point, and you've sunk in so much money, so much time, and you've made friends, it's community. It's not as easy as it sounds to just leave, and I wouldn't want to.
That's great. Carolyn, want to weigh in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jordan, explained it really well. We're told that we have a choice. Private entities can do whatever they want because you have a choice. But you don't actually have a choice, especially in a university setting when you sink X amount of dollars and X amount of hours, years, and X amount of time into something. And then what, I'm just supposed to get up and transfer, which theoretically, I guess I could. I haven't really looked into that. Or what, take a year off and then transfer to another school, take a year off of my studies and my legal career. And also, it's not just, establishing yourself at your university, like at Vanderbilt. It's establishing yourself in the greater area. I personally want to stay in Nashville after I graduate. So, I've made connections here in Nashville that are really helpful towards my future. And if I have to transfer, I'm going to lose all that hard work that I've put in. So that's really unfortunate. And so, when it comes to this kind of debate, what's going on is I don't want to turn this into a vaccinated versus unvaccinated situation. That's not what it is. It's, pro-choice versus anti-choice, pro-liberty versus anti-liberty. Whether I'm vaccinated or not is my business and only my business. And that's kind of really where I want to, turn this conversation to overall in the national kind of
So let's sort of end on that idea, because I've got 3 law students now in front of me. One thing I've been fighting personally here in Tennessee with some bills that I've run in dealing with legislatures is the conversation of private entities and private property rights. And so let me just set this up for you, and I'd love a response. So, for example, you're in the education realm facing the same issue, but I cannot tell you the calls and emails I'm getting from all over the state from employees who are now faced with the same decision. They've built a career. It's not just easy for most people to flip the switch and just go find another job. But right now they're faced with a decision. Either I get some businesses are saying they're creating different types of benefits, segregation issues for those who are unvaccinated, but many are saying vaccinate or you're fired, and a lot of legislators that I've talked to that are conservatives have taken the stance, well, it's a free market principle, it's private property rights, it's a private entity, they can do whatever they want to do. I'm like, we do regulate businesses here in Tennessee. Businesses are required to pay taxes, to get licenses. Businesses can't discriminate already as it is based on race, sex, national origin, so on and so forth. It's not as if businesses in America can just do whatever it is they want to do. But all of a sudden, when it's about healthcare, it's private property rights can be construed to now regulate the healthcare over a significant portion of the population. I haven't heard anyone else say this yet. I call that privatized policymaking. We're just shirking that off to the private sector. I would love some feedback, just some thoughts on that from some brilliant Vanderbilt University law students, which I am not.
I think that you really hit the nail on the head, that we do regulate business. There's hundreds and thousands of ways we regulate business, in the scope of protecting other people's freedoms and rights. And since I'm from Texas and proud of it, we in the state of Texas have, I think Governor Abbott either passed a executive order or he passed a bill through the House that does not allow businesses to require COVID passports.
Signed that into law 2 weeks ago.
Yes, sir. And I thought that was an excellent idea, and I think Tennessee should take a similar action. But I wanted to make something clear in these final few minutes. I probably will get the vaccine because I want to stay at Vanderbilt Law School, and I think that should be more my choice, that I should be allowed to decide that independent of that. But I came on here because I think that conservatives have stayed silent on a lot of issues for far too long, and it's time to enter the debate respectfully.
Yep.
And to make our concerns heard, because if the university never hears from any of us that, oh, we don't like this, and they don't know any of that information, they just hear one side very loudly proclaiming one thing, they think, oh, we need to adjust to that. And I like Vanderbilt. I respect my professors. I want to stay there, but I think that it's wrong to mandate this vaccine.
It's good thoughts, man. Love that. Anyone else want to jump in on that? Oh, I see someone reaching for the unmute.
I think I would say, like, rather than taking a law approach at it, because I'm studying for the bar right now, and I just don't really want to think about the law approach. But I would kind of say, like, to the parents that are out there listening or might be listening to this, like, where does it end, right? If this was your child, where does it end with the school telling you and your child what they can put in your body or in your child's body? And I think that's kind of a daunting question, right? Because maybe the country's looking at this under the lens of like, oh, we just had to stay in our home for 1.5 years or something, like just do anything to get rid of this. And maybe that's kind of put rose-colored glasses on the fact that we're just being told what we have to do with our bodies.
I'm glad you brought that up. That parental rights issue actually is a huge issue right now. I don't know if you're familiar with what's happening in Tennessee. The Government Operations Committee actually met yesterday or day before yesterday, and Commissioner of Health Lisa Piercy testified before the committee. The Tennessee Department of Health had written a letter and put out the idea through it's a agency construed mature minor doctrine that has been put together from case law and various statutes to come up with this mature minor doctrine, which sort of promulgates the thought that a vaccinating partner, a doctor, or whoever it is giving vaccines can allow anyone 14 years old or older to receive a vaccine without parental consent. And that went out from the Tennessee Department of Health all across the state, which you can imagine raised the eyebrows of several conservatives and parents saying, well, wait a minute. I mean, like Jordan's been saying, I completely agree. This isn't about vaccine good, vaccine bad. But parents are saying, I'm the final arbiter until this child's 18 on what type of medical treatment that my child is going to receive. And so this is a big issue happening right now in Tennessee in terms of, in this case, not only private entities regulating health, but now the state giving sort of carving out medical rights for a 14-year-old to make decisions outside of their parents. It's actually quite incredible. What's going on here in Tennessee, by the way, which people have told me, I live in Williamson County. I'm supposed to live in the reddest county in the reddest state. I can't say that it always feels that way, but there you go.
My main goal when I talk about, my opinion when it comes to politics or law or whatever is just to make other people feel more comfortable talking their own opinion. It's funny because I have a lot of people that reach out to me who are like in the dark conservatives, like they won't tell anyone they're conservative, but they reach out to me. And then I see them in class and I see them hanging out with their liberal peers that all talk negatively about me. And I'm like, and they're too scared to say anything because they're like, I don't want to lose friends. I don't want to lose potential, references, networking, jobs, whatnot. And I mean, I totally get that. But it's like if I mean, I'm fine putting a target on my back if it means that it makes other people more comfortable speaking their mind and progressing towards a more, healthy dialogue in the future between parties.
So that's directly a casualty of the COVID policies we had. Because when I was a 1L, I became really good friends with the president of the American Constitution Society, which is obviously very liberal, right? And so, like, when you have these outside of the classroom interactions with people all the time, and you get to know them as a person, you can't just be like, oh, he's a X belief, obviously I'm just going to hate him, right? And so because Vanderbilt had all these, restrictions in place, and we couldn't do anything fun ever in the law school or on Vanderbilt grounds, people didn't really get to meet each other. And now they just see Carolyn and they're like, oh, that's the conservative chick, like, let's hate on her, right? Rather than like knowing her for who she is and they think of her as like a person, right?
And
I totally agree. Like that, I've had that experience 100% that Carolyn's talking about. That I'll say something, especially when we got to be in person. I would have classes where I get to go, and students would come up to me afterwards and they're like, "Oh, like I really enjoyed that point." And I was like, and I think to myself, well, where were you when the other 4 people were yelling at me about making that point? But I'm not gonna stop voicing my opinion, because if you stop trying to have a legitimate discussion and just let yourself be railroaded, the country will start to look the way that you don't want it to look. And I completely agree with Brent that COVID is a huge problem with this, because you're not an independent human being, multifaceted with all these different beliefs, and you can be a great person that they would see. They just get to put you in a box and, oh, you're a conservative, and they get to demonize you if they want to. And this isn't the population at large, but there's definitely some people that do this. And there's a fear amongst the rest of the group that are neither vocal liberals or vocal conservatives that we just want to go along to get along. We don't want to upset them because we want to keep our friends. And I understand that, but it shouldn't be that way.
I do want to kind of distinguish the difference between my experience with Brent's and with Jordan's. I think it's really great that we have a recent grad, a rising 3L, and a rising 2L. I noticed throughout our conversation, my opinions on Vanderbilt were on the more negative side, whereas both Jordan and Brent mentioned some positive aspects of it. And I really want to say that the reason why my opinions are on the more negative side is because the COVID protocols created a relatively unhealthy atmosphere for the 1Ls, because just as Brent and Jordan have been saying, we weren't able to hang out. No one knows me as an individual outside of being the conservative chick who, like they can just put whatever beliefs they want on me, and they can demonize me if they wish or not, whatever. And then everyone's isolated. We're discouraged from hanging out outside of class, and that created a lot of problems with kind of the general socialization of the student body for the 1Ls. And it really decreased any healthy conversations. Like there weren't many debates in class because people were really too scared to say anything, because if you said anything that was slightly right of left, you would be, labeled and ostracized, or, because it's easy to do that when you don't know anyone. So that's why I do want to say that I have had some great experiences at Vanderbilt, of course, but I really think that the COVID protocols that were put in place increase the polarization of the student body. And I think that's problematic.
But I think it's easy to all acknowledge too. I mean, it's not necessarily speaking bad of Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
These COVID policies that are being put in place across the board are having this effect everywhere. I mean, across every sector of society, at every university, at every place of employment. These types of policies are divisive, and they clearly create 2 different classes of individuals. So someone said earlier about the mask, and well, automatically, you must be a conservative or a liberal or whatever, because so we are now entering into a season that because of these policies, we're now starting to label people, and it changes the culture completely. So that's not unique. That's not anything unique to Vanderbilt. That's happening across the spectrum everywhere, and it's the problem. That's part of the core of the problem of where we are with these policies.
And creating these 2 classes, these 2 kinds of people, those who are vaccinated and those who are unvaccinated, those being unvaccinated having to wear face masks, social distance. We also said that they would let the necessary personnel know about what means professors, which is like completely in violation of basic privacy. Maybe we can't go to tailgates, whatever. It's really problematic, and it's only going to further the polarization that was created last year in my class into the future. And I'm really concerned about that because we aren't having any healthy conversation or dialogue, and that's literally what law school is supposed to be.
Right.
You know, that is the definition of, it's a pillar of law school. So it's concerning.
Yeah, y'all should be freely arguing these topics. That's the whole point.
In a respectful manner, without having to fear, if I were to say something that is generally unpopular, that I would hear about it later, people talking negatively about me, or, I just, it's unfortunate.
Final thought, Brent, you've been waiting a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, like, some of the best friends my entire life I made at Vanderbilt, but it wasn't in class, right? It was out of class in our events, either in the school or out of the school. And the fact that Vanderbilt made it so that you couldn't have any of these events, and in fact, they encourage people to turn you in if you ever met up with other people outside of school in violation of the protocols, really just put a hamper on the 1Ls and 2Ls who are now 2Ls and 3Ls. And I just really want to see it go back. I want people to have choice whether they have the vaccines, but then I want to see the culture go back to like what I was blessed with when I was a 1L in the first part of my 2L. And we'll get back there someday, hopefully sooner than later.
Amen to that. Well, we can be part of that. Hey, y'all. Well, I'm going to hit end. I don't know if it's going to disconnect us all, but again, thank y'all for taking the time to do this. Good luck in all your future endeavors. All right. Bye, y'all.